She smells like poverty trying to play dress-up, Cassandra Davenport announced, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet. With a flick of her wrist, she deliberately tipped a full, bubbling glass of crystal down the back of Seraphina Vance's gown. The sound was a sharp, expensive hiss against the silk, a sound that seemed to silence the entire grand ballroom of the Art Institute of Chicago. The annual Luminaria Gala, the glittering apex of the city's social calendar, froze in a collective, silent gasp. An arctic cold seeped through the midnight blue fabric, shocking Seraphina's skin, but her face remained a placid mask of neutrality. Cassandra circled her, a predator in a couture dress, her posse of heiresses tittering behind their diamond-laden hands. She grabbed Seraphina's arm, her grip surprisingly strong, forcing her to turn. The light caught the simple, elegant platinum band on Seraphina's wrist, the only thing her grandfather had left her. "Oh my goodness, how clumsy of me," Cassandra mocked, her blue eyes devoid of any actual remorse. She grabbed a linen napkin from a passing waiter's tray and began roughly dabbing at Seraphina's drenched back. "Here, let me help you clean up. We can't have the staff looking messy." The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Seraphina gently but firmly removed Cassandra's hand from her arm. Her touch was feather-light, yet it carried an undeniable finality. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the sudden, tomb-like silence of the ballroom, reaching every corner. "Accidents happen," she said, her gaze locking with Cassandra's. The stare was not angry, not hurt, but something far more terrifying. It was calculating. It was the look of a mathematician solving a final, complex equation. Then, she delivered the killing blow, a quiet promise of annihilation. "But that $3 billion Innovatech deal your company is counting on to survive, that just became an accident, too." A flicker of confusion crossed Cassandra's perfectly made-up face. Little did she know, Seraphina Vance wasn't there to serve canapés or admire the art. She was there to decide the fate of empires, and Cassandra had just handed her the executioner's axe. The Luminaria Gala was a spectacle of obscene wealth. A river of black town cars disgorged Chicago's elite onto a plush red carpet. Men in bespoke tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than a teacher's annual salary floated through the museum's entrance, their laughter echoing off the marble. At the main doors, security guards with the eyes of hawks performed a practiced ritual of scrutiny, their gazes lingering longer on anyone who didn't fit the established mold. Seraphina Vance arrived alone, a solitary figure of quiet confidence. Her midnight blue gown was an understated masterpiece of tailoring, flowing around her like liquid night. Her natural hair was styled in a sophisticated crown of intricate coils, a statement in a room of straightened, processed blondes. She presented her digital invitation, but the burly security guard at the velvet rope held up a hand, his brow furrowed in suspicion. "I'm going to need to see some additional identification," he stated flatly, a request he hadn't made of the previous dozen guests who looked just like Cassandra Davenport. Seraphina's composure was a fortress. She didn't sigh, she didn't roll her eyes, she simply met his gaze. "Of course," she said, her voice smooth as glass, as she produced her driver's license from her small clutch. He subjected it to an unnecessarily long inspection under a small light, before reluctantly waving her through with a grudging, "Enjoy your evening, ma'am." Inside, the air hummed with the buzz of 1,000 conversations, lubricated by an endless flow of vintage champagne. Seraphina navigated the glittering throng with a practiced, unobtrusive grace. She was a ghost in the machine, observing, cataloging, analyzing. In these gilded cages, anonymity was her greatest weapon. Across the hall, under the magnificent glow of a Dale Chihuly chandelier, Cassandra Davenport held court. Her blonde hair was a marvel of engineering, her neck and wrists dripping with so many diamonds she seemed to be on fire. She was a queen bee surrounded by her drone-like admirers, all laughing a little too loudly at her jokes. Cassandra's gaze swept the room and landed on Serafina. She leaned into her circle, her voice a conspiratorial stage whisper designed to carry. Who on earth let the help attend as a guest? Her friends, a collection of vapid socialites, glanced over, their faces a mixture of amusement and practiced disdain. They giggled, the sound like breaking glass. Serafina, seemingly oblivious, accepted a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her eyes never leaving Cassandra. She wasn't just watching a socialite, she was conducting a threat assessment. The museum's director fawned over Cassandra. Two members of the board of trustees roared with laughter at a joke that wasn't funny. A senior partner from a major investment bank kissed her cheek with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. To them, Cassandra Davenport was the sun around which their world revolved. For Serafina, this wasn't a party. It was reconnaissance on enemy territory. Cassandra's predatory interest in Serafina didn't wane. When Serafina gracefully accepted a second glass of champagne, Cassandra's voice sliced through the chatter again, this time louder, bolder. The help usually knows better than to drink on the job. Her circle exchanged nervous glances, their loyalty warring with their better judgment, but duty won. They laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. Serafina's expression remained as serene as a sleeping lake. She reached into her clutch and extracted not a phone, but a small, leather-bound notebook and a slim, elegant fountain pen. With deliberate, precise strokes, she wrote something down, her eyes flicking up to Cassandra for a brief moment. A name. A company. And then 3 chilling words. Initiate hostile acquisition. The self-proclaimed Queen of Chicago society had no idea she was being evaluated, judged, and condemned by the one woman who held her entire family's legacy in the palm of her hand. The assault continued during the appetizer course. Serafina was seated at a table with lesser-known philanthropists, people who were here for the art, not the social climbing. Conversation about the museum's new impressionist wing died the moment Cassandra approached, her smile as bright and artificial as a searchlight. "I don't believe we've met," Cassandra purred, resting her perfectly manicured fingers on the back of an empty chair. The condescension in her voice was a physical force. "Are you someone's +1?" The entire table fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. An invisible tension descended. Eyes darted between the two women, sensing a confrontation. Serafina, ever poised, calmly extended a hand. Serafina Vance. She offered nothing more. No title, no company name, no credentials to justify her existence in this space. Cassandra's smile tightened at the pointedly minimal response. The silence stretched, and she felt compelled to fill it, to reassert her dominance. Davenport. Cassandra Davenport, of Davenport Consolidated. She paused, waiting for the expected wave of recognition, of awe. When nothing came, a flicker of raw irritation crossed her features. "We're in the final stages of a major tech acquisition next week," she added, her tone implying Serafina couldn't possibly comprehend such things. "Probably nothing you'd understand." Serafina took a slow sip of her water, her eyes holding Cassandra's over the rim of the glass. "I understand more than you might think, Miss Davenport." Cassandra let out a laugh that was too loud, too sharp. "Well," she said, placing a patronizing hand on Serafina's shoulder, "if you ever find yourself in need of employment, we're always looking for good people in our service division." The gesture was the final straw. Serafina removed Cassandra's hand from her shoulder. Her touch was gentle, yet it was an unmistakable, unyielding rejection. "I'm not looking for employment," she said, her voice still quiet but now infused with a steel that made the people at the table sit up straighter. She rose from her chair, a vision of grace and power. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to make a rather important call." Cassandra watched her retreat, a sliver of surprise piercing her arrogant confidence. There was something about the woman's quiet authority that was deeply unsettling. The awkward silence at the table persisted until Cassandra, with a dismissive shrug, returned to her VIP section, whispering and laughing with her friends. In the relative quiet of a deserted hallway, lined with Grecian statues that had witnessed millennia, Serafina pressed her phone to her ear. Her posture shifted. The easy grace was still there, but now it was underpinned by an undeniable aura of command, a weight of authority settling onto her shoulders like a familiar, custom-tailored coat. "Marcus," she said, her voice low but crackling with power. "I want a complete portfolio breakdown of Davenport Consolidated. I need every holding, every asset, and every single vulnerability, down to the last decimal point." She paused, listening. "Focus on their pending acquisitions. Yes, particularly the Innovatech deal." Another pause. "And contact our team in London. Tell them to be ready to move at market open. Plans have changed." She ended the call, took a single, deep, centering breath, and smoothed her expression back into one of serene neutrality before gliding back into the glittering chaos of the gala. Inside, Cassandra watched her return, a newfound seed of suspicion taking root in her mind. She whispered urgently to a silver-haired man, her father's chief financial officer, who kept glancing nervously in Serafina's direction. The woman Cassandra had dismissed as the help was already, with a single phone call, beginning the systematic and total demolition of her family's 100-year-old empire. The charity auction began as waiters cleared away the remnants of the main course. A silver-tongued auctioneer took the stage, showcasing a dazzling array of luxury items donated by the city's corporate titans. A palpable excitement rippled through the crowd as numbered paddles rose and fell, a blatant display of financial muscle. "Our next item," the auctioneer announced, "is a 3-week all-inclusive stay on a private super yacht in the Greek Isles. The bidding starts at a generous $75,000. Cassandra's paddle shot up instantly. When others dared to bid against her, she countered with aggressive, almost vicious speed. Her expression hardened with each challenge, transforming the charity event into a personal battleground. The room watched, mesmerized by the raw display of dominance. "Sold!" the auctioneer cried. "To Miss Davenport for $250,000. Thunderous applause erupted. The master of ceremonies invited Cassandra to the stage to be recognized for her extraordinary generosity. She sauntered into the spotlight, basking in the adoration, accepting the congratulations with a performance of practiced, false humility. On her way back to her table, Cassandra deliberately detoured to where Serafina sat. She stopped directly behind Serafina's chair, placing her hand on the back of it, a gesture of ownership. "Perhaps," Cassandra said, her voice ringing out loud enough for the entire section to hear, "you could be a dear, and deliver my wrap to the valet. It's the white sable by the coat check." Her friends at the adjacent table snickered, a chorus of mean-spirited approval. Conversation at Serafina's table didn't just stop. It evaporated. Silverware froze. Every single eye swiveled to Serafina, waiting, holding their breath for the reaction. The weight of public humiliation hung in the air, thick and toxic. Serafina rose from her chair, not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate grace that drew every eye. She turned to face Cassandra directly. Her posture was ramrod straight, radiating a dignity that seemed to suck the air out of Cassandra's sails. She maintained unwavering eye contact. "I don't work here, Ms. Davenport," Serafina stated, her voice a calm, clear bell in the ringing silence. "But I can understand your confusion. You seem to be a person who categorizes people based solely on their appearance and your own inherited biases." Cassandra's smile hardened into something brittle and ugly. "Don't be so sensitive," she snapped, turning to the table as if appealing to a jury of her peers. "It was just a little joke. Some people just don't know how to navigate these events." An older gentleman at the table, a respected judge, cleared his throat. "Cassandra, I believe the auction results are being tallied. Perhaps we should—" "Actually," Cassandra interrupted, doubling down, sensing she was losing control. "Since you seem to be so educated on the finer points of these events, perhaps you'd like to share your credentials with the table. Ms. Vance, was it? Where did you study? What exactly brings you to our little gathering?" Serafina remained standing, a pillar of composure in the face of the public interrogation. "I studied at MIT and Stanford Law," she said, her voice carrying just enough to reach the nearby tables, where conversations had now completely ceased. "As for why I'm here—" Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She retrieved it, glanced at the screen, a flicker of a smile touching her lips. "Excuse me. Unlike some, I have business that can't wait." She moved to leave, but Cassandra, consumed by a need to have the last word, called after her loudly, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't forget to clean the bathrooms on your way out." Several audible gasps punctuated the shocked silence that followed. This time Serafina didn't even pause. She didn't turn back. Her exit was unhurried, purposeful, and devastatingly final. In the relative privacy of the opulent, marble-clad bathroom, Serafina answered her phone with 3 words that would have made Cassandra Davenport's blood run cold. "Liquidate their position." The seeds of Cassandra's destruction, planted by her own casual cruelty, were now beginning to sprout. Serafina found refuge in an empty exhibition room filled with ancient Mesoamerican artifacts. Glass cases gleamed under perfectly angled spotlights. Here, away from the prying, judging eyes, her composed facade momentarily wavered. She gripped the edge of a cool marble display pedestal, her knuckles turning white. She closed her eyes, and the image of her grandfather, his hands calloused from a lifetime of labor, flashed in her mind. He had been a janitor in a downtown skyscraper, the very same building that now housed Davenport Consolidated's main rival. He'd always told her, "They will look right through you, my star. Let them. The most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody sees coming." Her phone rang again, pulling her back to the present. She straightened up, her spine stiffening, the professional mask of the CEO sliding perfectly back into place. "Marcus, accelerate everything," Serafina commanded, her voice steady and resolute once more. "I want Apex Dynamics to have a controlling interest in Innovatech before the markets open in New York. I don't care what it costs." She paced between display cases of ancient gold jewelry, a modern-day warrior plotting her campaign. "Use the offshore accounts in the Caymans and get Dr. Eris Thorne, Innovatech's CEO, on a secure line. Tell her I'm proposing an alternative partnership, a real partnership." She ended the call, her fingers instinctively touching the simple platinum band on her wrist. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "This belonged to my father, who polished floors in a bank he wasn't allowed to have an account in. When you wear it, you remember who you are and who we come from." Serafina murmured to herself, a personal mantra. "Stay 10 steps ahead, and look the part when you arrive." Her resolve crystallized into diamond-hard certainty. She made one more call, this time to her sister. The connection was instantaneous, a lifetime of shared understanding needing no preamble. "Jasmine," Serafina began, "remember that debate we had about whether I should stay silent or speak up at these ridiculous events?" She outlined the night's humiliations, her voice controlled, but the underlying tension evident. "No, I'm not leaving. That's exactly what she expects me to do." Jasmine's voice came through, warm and fierce. "Remember what Grandpa said." "What?" Serafina completed the phrase, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time that night. "They'll never see you coming until you own the ground they're standing on." "Damn right," Jasmine said. "Now go own it." "I'll call you tomorrow with an update," Serafina promised. "The ground is about to get very shaky." Returning to the gala with a renewed, unshakable sense of purpose, Serafina noticed Cassandra speaking animatedly with an elderly man wearing the museum board chairman's pin. Without hesitation, she approached them directly, extending her hand to the chairman. "Mr. Harrington, a pleasure. I've been hoping to make your acquaintance," Serafina said warmly. "I'm Serafina Vance." The chairman's face lit up with immediate, enthusiastic recognition. "Ms. Vance, the pleasure is all mine." He took her hand in both of his. "Your foundation's work in funding STEM programs for underprivileged youth is nothing short of revolutionary. The board was just discussing your latest grant proposal." Cassandra's smile froze on her face. Her eyes darted between Serafina and the chairman, a dawning horror creeping into her expression. Something significant, something catastrophic, was shifting beneath her feet. The first tremor of doubt had arrived. "I was just telling Cassandra," the chairman continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding, "about your tremendous, and I mean tremendous support of our new modern art wing. Without your $75 million donation, we couldn't possibly have broken ground next month." Cassandra's champagne glass trembled in her hand. A tiny, violent earthquake. The name on the new wing was the Vance Center for Contemporary Art. The realization dawned, not like a sunrise, but like a flash of lightning, illuminating the fact that she had severely, epically misjudged someone, or something. At that exact moment, Serafina's phone buzzed with a text from her chief of operations. She glanced at it discreetly. It read, "Phase 1 complete. Innovatech acquisition secured. Davenport stock will be vulnerable at market open, awaiting your signal for Phase 2. While Cassandra Davenport had been playing petty social games, Serafina Vance had been moving financial mountains that were about to bury her alive. The first rays of morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Davenport Consolidated's headquarters. Cassandra strode through the gleaming glass doors into an emergency board meeting that was already in a state of chaos. A dozen executives in tailored suits spoke in hushed, panicked tones. Wall-sized screens displayed spreadsheets and stock charts, all showing a terrifying, precipitous downward trend in screaming red. "Someone better explain to me what the hell is happening right now," Cassandra demanded, dropping her $5,000 handbag onto the massive mahogany conference table with a thud. Martin Wells, the CFO, a man who had served her father for 30 years, loosened his Hermes tie. "Someone's buying up Innovatech shares at a 50% premium, Cassandra. Our deal. It's falling apart." Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. "They've acquired a controlling stake in the last 3 hours since the Asian markets opened. It's an unprecedented blitz." Cassandra dismissed their panic with an arrogant wave of her hand. "Find out who is behind it and make them an offer they can't refuse. Shut it down. We have invested far too much to lose this acquisition now." She sat at the head of the table, projecting a confidence she was very far from feeling. This had to be a negotiation tactic, a play for better terms. It was the only thing that made sense. Her personal assistant scurried in, holding a tablet like a sacred offering. Ms. Davenport, Ms. Seraphina Vance is requesting a meeting this afternoon. She says it's regarding the Innovatech acquisition." Cassandra frowned. The name meant nothing to her, a phantom from the night before. And then a cold dread washed over her as her assistant added, "She was at the gala last night." Cassandra let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "The woman I mistook for a waitress? What could she possibly want? A job application?" She shook her head at the sheer absurdity of it all. But her laughter died in her throat as she saw the color drain from her CFO's face. He was staring at his own tablet, his eyes wide with terror. He looked up slowly, his voice a choked whisper. "Ms. Vance is the founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics." He swallowed hard. According to this, they're Innovatech's largest new shareholder, as of 20 minutes ago. The silence in the room was absolute. Seraphina's parting words from the gala echoed in Cassandra's mind, no longer a strange comment, but a prophecy of doom. That just became an accident, too. She composed herself with a visible effort, straightening her blazer, fighting for control. "Schedule the meeting," she commanded, her voice betraying nothing, but beneath the table, her perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm, drawing blood. Meanwhile, in her sprawling downtown office with a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, Seraphina Vance sat at the head of a different kind of table, surrounded by her core team of strategists and lawyers. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing Davenport Consolidated's financial vulnerabilities in alarming three-dimensional detail. "Their entire 5-year growth strategy hinges on acquiring Innovatech," Seraphina explained, highlighting key data points with a flick of her wrist. "Without their patents and client base, Davenport's stock plummets, and their debt covenants will be triggered." She navigated through layers of complex financial information with the effortless ease of a master conductor. "They've overextended, betting the entire company on this one single move." Her chief counsel, Vanessa, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing, looked at her with concern. "This feels personal, Seraphina." Seraphina straightened a stack of documents, aligning their edges with perfect precision. "Business is always personal, Vanessa," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "Cassandra Davenport is just now learning that lesson." "But why?" Vanessa pressed gently. Seraphina looked out the window at the city below. "Because my grandfather spent 40 years of his life scrubbing the floors of buildings like that one," she said, nodding towards the distant Davenport Tower. "While men like her father built empires on the backs of people they refused to see, this isn't just about one woman's arrogance. It's about a debt being paid." As Cassandra frantically prepared for the meeting, her phone rang with news that made her physically stagger. Their primary lender, rattled by the morning's stock volatility and the collapse of the Innovatech deal, was calling in their loans. Seraphina Vance arrived at Davenport Consolidated precisely on time. The gleaming skyscraper, a monument to a century of Davenport dominance, reflected the afternoon sun. She entered the lobby flanked by Vanessa and 2 of her top investment bankers, all carrying identical, sleek leather portfolios. The receptionist glanced up, her eyes quickly assessing Seraphina's appearance, her natural hair, her dark skin. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone laced with a professional skepticism that bordered on suspicion. "Seraphina Vance for Cassandra Davenport," Seraphina stated simply. Recognition, followed by a flash of panic, dawned on the receptionist's face. The morning's shocking financial news suddenly clicked into place. "Of course, Ms. Vance. Right this way. They're expecting you in the executive boardroom." A nervous young assistant led them through cavernous open-concept offices where employees frantically pretended not to stare. Whispered conversations halted as they passed. News, especially bad news, travels at the speed of light in the world of high finance. The boardroom door swung open to reveal Cassandra seated with her entire executive team. Her smile was a painted-on mask that didn't reach her terrified eyes. "Ms. Vance, thank you for coming," Cassandra began, gesturing towards the empty chairs. "I'm sure we can clear up this aggressive and unnecessary misunderstanding." "This isn't a misunderstanding," Serafina interrupted smoothly, her voice commanding the room's absolute attention. "This is business, Ms. Davenport." She opened her portfolio and removed a single document. "Your company valued Innovatech at $3 billion. My analysis, however, suggests it's worth considerably more, especially with their new quantum encryption patent." Cassandra's team exchanged confused, panicked glances. The quantum patent information hadn't been in any of their due diligence reports. It had been kept a closely guarded secret. Serafina continued, her voice measured and lethal. "Davenport Consolidated is now facing a catastrophic liquidity crisis due to your overextension on this failed acquisition. Your stock is down 22% as of this moment." Cassandra attempted a show of bravado, leaning forward. "We have other lenders, other options." Serafina placed a thick folder on the table. "Your primary Asian investors withdrew their support 2 hours ago following this morning's news. 3 of your board members have been selling off their shares since the market opened." She didn't need to check notes. The facts were etched into her memory. "And your main credit line with First National of Chicago is being reviewed as we speak. I know because I spoke to their chairman this morning." Cassandra's mask of confidence finally slipped, revealing a flicker of raw, primal fear before her practiced arrogance returned. Serafina stood, gathering her materials with an air of finality. "I will leave you with a proposal. It is far more generous than the one you would have offered me." She walked towards the door, her team following in perfect, synchronized movement. At the threshold, Serafina paused and turned back, her gaze pinning Cassandra to her chair. "By the way," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "I knew exactly who you were at the gala before you ever approached my table. The real question is, why didn't you bother to find out who I was?" She exited, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in her wake. Cassandra stared at the unopened proposal folder on the table, its presence as ominous as a ticking bomb. Back in her own office, as Serafina reviewed the afternoon's market movements, her assistant announced an unexpected call. "It's Preston Davenport on line 1, her assistant said cautiously. "Cassandra's father." Serafina's eyebrow raised slightly. The company's founder, the old patriarch who had stepped down years ago, passing the reins to his daughter. The Lion in Winter. She picked up the phone. "Mr. Davenport, what can I do for you?" His voice came through the line, gravelly with age but still booming with an authority that had crushed lesser men for half a century. "You've got my daughter cornered, Ms. Vance, but you're forgetting who built this empire from the ground up." The old lion had entered the game, not realizing he was facing a predator who had studied his every move, his every weakness for years. "This is getting intense. The old guard is coming out to play, but do you think he stands a chance against a mind like Serafina's? Let us know your predictions in the comments below, and if you're loving this story of righteous revenge, don't forget to subscribe so you can see how it all unfolds. Preston Davenport arrived at Serafina's office unannounced the following day, a storm cloud in a Savile Row suit. His imposing figure filled the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered despite his 70-plus years, his silver hair immaculately styled. Unlike his daughter's trendy, fashionable attire, he wore a simple, classic navy suit that didn't just whisper old money. It roared it. Serafina's assistant, Sarah, appeared behind him, her face a mask of apology. "Miss Vance, I'm so sorry, he insisted." "It's all right, Sarah," Serafina said calmly. not looking up from the document she was reading. She let the silence stretch for a full 10 seconds before slowly raising her head. "Mr. Davenport, please come in." He strode into the office without waiting for a further invitation, his presence an attempt to dominate the space. He ignored the chair offered to him, choosing to stand over her desk like a king addressing a subordinate. "My daughter made a mistake," he began without preamble, his voice resonating with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. "A social faux pas, but you are dismantling a century-old company over a petty insult." Serafina motioned again to the chair. "Please, sit." He reluctantly complied, the gesture itself a small concession of power that did not go unnoticed. "With all due respect, Mr. Davenport," Serafina began, her voice level and devoid of emotion, "this isn't about last night's insult. It's about the systemic, corrosive arrogance that allowed it to happen." She brought up a series of documents on her tablet, turning the screen toward him. "Your company has been sued 12 times for discrimination in the past decade alone, each case quietly settled out of court. Your employee turnover rate for women and minorities in management positions is nearly 4 times the industry average. Your board has 1 woman and no people of color." Preston's face reddened. "That has nothing to do with our business performance." "It has everything to do with it," Serafina countered, her voice as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "Your corporate culture, the one you built, costs you talent. It costs you innovation. And now, it has cost you your most important acquisition." The old man leaned forward, his cologne filling the space between them, an invasive scent of power and privilege. "Listen to me, little girl. I have connections in this city that your fancy degrees can't possibly compete with. Back off now, or I will make sure you never close another deal in Chicago again." Serafina didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "You might want to check your news alerts, Mr. Davenport." As if on cue, his phone buzzed on the desk beside him. He glanced down, his face darkening as he read the headline from the Wall Street Journal. Innovatech CEO Dr. Eris Thorne announces exclusive partnership with Apex Dynamics, citing shared values and vision for the future. "That's the $3 billion deal your daughter lost," Serafina said quietly. "Not because of one mistake at a gala, but because the rotten culture your company fostered made that mistake, and countless others, inevitable." Preston Davenport stood abruptly, his face a thunderous mask of fury. "This isn't over. The Davenport name still means something in this town." Serafina remained seated, the calm center of the storm he had created. "Names fade, Mr. Davenport. Values endure." He stormed out of her office without another word, his shoulders rigid with a lifetime of unchecked rage. Once she was alone, Serafina allowed herself a slow, controlled exhale. She sent a quick text to her sister. "Round 2 complete. The old guard is getting desperate." Vanessa entered moments later. That looked intense. "Predictable," Serafina corrected. "They always believe their history protects them from the future. They believe their name is a shield." Her phone alerted her to a breaking news bulletin. Cassandra had called an emergency press conference, scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. The alert highlighted the opening statement already released to the media. "Recent market disruptions orchestrated by hostile, agenda-driven actions of Serafina Vance." Cassandra was making this very public. It was exactly the miscalculation Serafina had been counting on. A horde of television cameras and reporters were gathered on the steps of the Davenport Consolidated headquarters, a frantic buzz of anticipation in the air. The market was in a freefall. Davenport stock was now down a catastrophic 36% in just 24 hours. Cassandra emerged through the glass doors, flanked by a phalanx of PR handlers. She wore designer sunglasses to hide her sleepless, panicked eyes. and a severe navy suit meant to project an authority her company no longer possessed. "Thank you all for coming," Cassandra began, her voice amplified by a dozen microphones. "Recent market fluctuations have been driven by a hostile and malicious takeover attempt by Apex Dynamics, led by its CEO, Serafina Vance." The camera shutters clicked like a swarm of angry insects. Reporters began shouting questions. Cassandra raised a hand for silence, a desperate plea for control. "What the public isn't aware of," she continued, "is that Ms. Vance is targeting our company for deeply personal and vindictive reasons, stemming from a minor misunderstanding at a private charity event." Across town, in the high-tech boardroom of Apex Dynamics, Serafina watched the press conference with her executive team. Multiple screens displayed the live feed, real-time market reactions, and social media trends, all of them brutal for Davenport. "She's trying to make this about you personally, not about business," Vanessa observed, a note of worry in her voice. Serafina shook her head, a small, knowing smile on her lips. "She still doesn't get it. She thinks she's in a fight with a person. She's in a fight with an idea whose time has come." On the screen, Cassandra was spinning her narrative of victimhood. "This unprovoked attack on a century-old, family-run American business represents a dangerous new trend of personal vendettas influencing—" Her voice was suddenly cut off as the newsfeed split, showing a second press conference beginning simultaneously at Innovatech's headquarters. Their CEO, the brilliant Dr. Eris Thorne, stood at a podium, her expression calm and resolute. "Today, we are thrilled to announce our new strategic partnership with Apex Dynamics," Dr. Thorne stated clearly. "This will end all acquisition talks with Davenport Consolidated. This decision was not made lightly, nor was it made recently." The room watched, stunned, as Dr. Thorne revealed a series of documents on a massive digital display behind her. They were charts showing Davenport's planned restructuring of Innovatech post-acquisition. The plan highlighted the intended dismantling of Innovatech's entire research and development division. "This proposal," Dr. Thorne explained, her voice ringing with indignation, "would have eliminated over 400 jobs in our most innovative department, effectively gutting the very heart of our company. By contrast, Apex Dynamics is committed to expanding our research, increasing our R&D funding by 40% over the next 5 years." A reporter raised his hand. "Dr. Thorne, can you address the speculation about Serafina Vance's personal role in this decision?" Dr. Thorne smiled, a genuine warm expression. "Serafina and I have known each other since our days at MIT. She was developing quantum computing algorithms, while the rest of us were still trying to master basic coding." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Her company's investment philosophy aligns perfectly with our core values, building and nurturing innovation, rather than simply extracting value for shareholders. This was a business decision, and it was an easy one." The camera feed returned to Cassandra's press conference, which had now devolved into utter chaos. Reporters were receiving the breaking news on their phones, shouting overlapping, frantic questions. "Is it true you mistook Ms. Vance for janitorial staff at the museum gala?" one reporter yelled. Cassandra, visibly flustered, removed her sunglasses. "That's not. We had a simple miscommunication," another reporter shouted, louder than the rest. "Sources are confirming that Miss Vance's private foundation was the primary benefactor of the new wing at the museum, with a $75 million donation. Did you know she was the gala's largest donor when you confronted her?" The dam broke. A flood of revelations poured across the financial networks, displaying Serafina's full biography for the world to see. MIT and Stanford Law. Forbes's most powerful women in finance list for 5 years running. $40 billion in assets under management. Board positions at multiple Fortune 500 companies. Cassandra's carefully orchestrated press conference collapsed in on itself. She beat a hasty retreat back inside the building, cameras capturing her panicked, undignified exit. In her office, Serafina finally turned to address her waiting team. "This was never about revenge," she said, standing and gesturing to the financial models still glowing on the screens. Davenport Consolidated's business model has always relied on devaluing people, their employees, their partners, and ultimately their investors. The market is simply correcting a century-long error. Her assistant entered the room, her expression grave. "Cassandra Davenport is on line 1. She's requesting a private meeting." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Serafina. She considered the request for a moment. "Tell her I accept," she said, her voice carrying a quiet, unshakable authority. "With one condition. The meeting will take place at 1145 North Clybourne Avenue." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "The old steel warehouse? The one we're redeveloping?" Serafina nodded. "The place where my grandfather worked as a night watchman for 30 years. The place where he taught me the value of work that people like the Davenports have always mocked." Cassandra Davenport was about to enter Serafina Vance's world, a place where pedigree meant nothing and character meant everything. The financial markets reacted with unprecedented speed. In 2 trading days, Davenport Consolidated's stock had fallen by 43%. Credit agencies downgraded their debt from AA to BBB, a catastrophic drop that triggered penalty clauses in their loan agreements. Business networks broadcast endless analysis, with Serafina Vance's strategic brilliance as the central topic. "What we're witnessing isn't just a failed acquisition," a sharp-eyed analyst explained on CNBC. "It's a masterclass in corporate warfare. It's the exposure of deep, systemic vulnerabilities that existed long before Apex Dynamics entered the picture." Inside the beleaguered Davenport headquarters, the board convened an emergency session. The very same boardroom that had once celebrated Cassandra's aggressive leadership now pulsed with fear and recrimination. "The Innovatech deal was our cornerstone for the next decade," the lead director stated, his face pale. "Now we're facing potential covenant violations on over $4 billion in debt." The CFO distributed updated financial projections that showed a terrifying path toward bankruptcy within 60 days. A senior board member, a man who had been on the board since Preston's reign, slowly removed his glasses. "Perhaps it's time we discuss Cassandra's position as chairperson." Meanwhile, Serafina was in Silicon Valley, meeting with Dr. Thorne and the jubilant executive team at Innovatech. The atmosphere was a universe away from the panic gripping Chicago. The air crackled with energy and optimism. "Our 5-year growth strategy not only preserves every single job, but will double your research funding," Serafina explained, navigating through a series of stunning presentation slides. Digital displays showed plans for global expansion, ambitious innovation targets, and robust talent development initiatives. "Effective immediately, we're also increasing salaries for your entire engineering staff by 20% to bring them above market rates." Innovatech's chief technology officer let out a low whistle. "Davenport wanted to cut our department by half." Serafina nodded. "Innovation doesn't come from corner offices or spreadsheets," she told them, her words resonating with the room full of creators and thinkers. "It comes from creating environments where brilliant people feel valued and empowered, regardless of their background." Later that afternoon, Cassandra's black Maybach pulled up to the address Serafina had provided. It was a cavernous, old brick warehouse in a rapidly gentrifying part of the city, surrounded by construction sites and new condo buildings. An old, faded sign above the door read, "Clybourne Steel and Iron." Cassandra checked the address on her phone again, certain there must be some mistake. She exited the car reluctantly, her stiletto heels sinking slightly into the cracked asphalt. Serafina answered the massive, rolling steel door herself. No assistant, no security. It was a deliberate display of vulnerability that communicated absolute, unshakable confidence. "Come in, Cassandra," she said simply. The interior was a vast, empty space, filled with dust motes dancing in the shafts of light from the high windows. In the center of the concrete floor sat a simple folding table and 2 metal chairs. Family photos and academic degrees didn't line these walls, only the ghosts of 100 years of Chicago industry. "My grandfather walked these floors every night for 30 years, Serafina explained, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "He worked for men who owned companies like yours." Cassandra remained standing near the door, visibly uncomfortable, clutching her purse like a life raft. "I didn't come here for a history lesson." "Oh, that's exactly what you need," Serafina countered, gesturing to one of the stark metal chairs. "Your company is failing because you never understood the value of the people you considered beneath you. The cleaners, the security guards, the assistants, the people who actually make the world run." Cassandra's carefully constructed facade of defiance finally cracked. The fight went out of her. She sat down heavily, her designer bag dropping to the dusty floor with a soft thud. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "To destroy everything my family built?" Serafina shook her head. "I want to rebuild it. Davenport Consolidated employs thousands of people who don't deserve to lose their livelihoods because of a catastrophic failure in leadership." She slid a single document across the table. Cassandra hesitated before picking it up. "My terms," Serafina explained. 1. You and your father step down from all positions, effective immediately. 2. The board will be restructured to include employee representatives and independent directors. 3. My firm, Apex Dynamics, acquires a 30% stake in the company with 2 board seats to ensure compliance and oversee the cultural transformation. She paused. "We will also provide the capital to stabilize the company and prevent bankruptcy." Cassandra scanned the document, her expression cycling through disbelief, outrage, and finally, a soul-crushing resignation. "You're taking control." "I'm providing salvation," Serafina corrected, her voice flat. "This isn't charity, it's sound business. Studies show that companies with diverse leadership and ethical practices consistently outperform their competitors. I am making your company profitable again." Cassandra closed the document, visibly struggling with the remnants of her pride. "And if I refuse?" "Then we proceed with the full hostile takeover. We break up the company, sell it for parts, and you and your father lose everything," Serafina stated without a trace of emotion. "Your choice." Cassandra stood, the document clutched in her trembling, manicured fingers. I'll need to consult our legal team." "You have 24 hours, Serafina responded. "After that, the offer is off the table, and we move to Phase 3. As Cassandra turned to leave, her shoulders slumped in defeat, Serafina added one more thing. "The help you referred to at the gala. The museum has established a scholarship fund for the children of their service and support staff. Your personal, tax-deductible donation of $5 million would be an appropriate gesture of goodwill." Cassandra turned back, ready to object, but something in Serafina's unwavering, implacable gaze stopped her. She just nodded once, a tiny, defeated gesture, and exited without another word. The following week, financial news outlets exploded with the announcement of major leadership and structural changes at Davenport Consolidated. The market responded with cautious optimism, and the stock rebounded 15% on the news of Serafina Vance's direct involvement. "This represents a necessary evolution for a legacy company," Serafina told reporters outside the Davenport Tower. "We are preserving what works while modernizing what is broken." What the business world didn't realize was that Serafina had been studying Davenport Consolidated for months before the gala. She had been deeply concerned about their predatory acquisition practices, which involved buying up innovative smaller companies and stripping them for assets, destroying jobs and innovation in the process. Cassandra's insult didn't start the plan. It merely provided the perfect opportunity to accelerate it. In her private office, Serafina reviewed the final, signed agreements. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from her sister, her executive team, and Dr. Thorne at Innovatech. But one message stood out. It was from the 92-year-old widow of her grandfather's former boss at the steel warehouse. It simply said, "Your grandfather, Eli, would be so proud. You didn't just win the game, you changed the rules." As Serafina signed the final piece of paperwork securing her company's stake in the new Davenport Consolidated, her assistant delivered a handwritten note on heavy cream stationery bearing the Davenport family crest. She opened it carefully. It was from Preston Davenport. The bold, angry handwriting read, "You've won this round. But remember who taught Cassandra everything she knows. This is not over." Serafina had neutralized the queen, but the old king was marshalling his forces for one final, desperate battle. Preston Davenport retreated to his home office, a dark, wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and resentment. Surrounded by hunting trophies and decades of financial industry awards, he began to work the phones. These were not calls to bankers or lawyers. These were calls to the shadows, to the men who formed the bedrock of his power. A network cultivated over 50 years of backroom deals and handshake agreements. "Richard, it's Preston Davenport. A word of caution about Apex Dynamics," he'd say, his voice a low growl. He repeated similar conversations all day, planting seeds of doubt with board members of other corporations, powerful investors, and banking executives. His message was always the same, wrapped in carefully coded language. Serafina Vance's actions were emotional, not strategic. Her judgment was compromised. She was overly aggressive, lacked the traditional background, and had pushed too far too fast. He never explicitly mentioned her race or her gender, but he didn't have to. The code was understood by the men he was talking to. Serafina's team began picking up the chatter through their own industry allies. Her phone lit up with concerned messages. "This is serious, Serafina," Vanessa warned during an emergency meeting. "He's conducting a whisper campaign. He's trying to undermine confidence in your leadership across the entire financial sector, to paint you as an unstable, affirmative action caricature." Serafina listened, her expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. "Document everything," she commanded. "Record the names, the dates, the exact phrasing they use." Instead of fighting his shadows with more shadows, Serafina brought his campaign into the light. She compiled every reported communication into a comprehensive dossier. To this, she added documented instances of similar behavior throughout Davenport Consolidated's history. Emails, sworn testimony from former employees, and internal meeting minutes her team had uncovered during their due diligence. The pattern that emerged was undeniable. A systematic, decades-long practice of devaluing and sabotaging contributions from women and minorities. She sent the complete, explosive file to the newly restructured board of Davenport Consolidated, its major institutional shareholders, and, most importantly, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The subject line was simple and devastating. Pattern of conduct. Preston and Cassandra Davenport. The board called an extraordinary meeting. Preston Davenport entered the boardroom with the swagger of a man expecting to reassert his control. He found the assembled directors looking grim. "What's this emergency about?" Preston demanded, taking his customary seat at the head of the table. "We should be focusing on damage control from my daughter's situation." The new lead director, a woman appointed at Serafina's recommendation, cleared her throat. "James, We've received deeply disturbing documentation regarding your recent communications about Ms. Vance. Preston waved a dismissive hand. If this is about Serafina Vance, I'm simply stating the facts. She's using her background to play the victim while executing a hostile takeover. These communications, the director continued, sliding copies of the dossier around the table, violate our company's ethics policy, numerous securities regulations, and potentially federal discrimination laws. Preston scoffed. This is just business. You're all getting soft. Another board member, one of the few who had survived the old regime, spoke up firmly. Mr. Davenport, the board has reviewed Ms. Vance's business case separately from these communications. Her analysis of our company's weaknesses was 100% accurate. Your response was not to address those weaknesses, but to attack her character using coded, prejudicial language. Preston's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. I built this company from nothing. My father's little printing business became a global enterprise under my leadership, and you're letting this outsider dismantle it over political correctness. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. The lead director sat straighter. The board has voted. We are exercising the morality clause in your severance agreement to remove both you and Cassandra from all remaining honorary positions and to cancel your outstanding stock options. Furthermore, we are accelerating the full leadership transition plan proposed by Apex Dynamics. Preston stood so abruptly, his chair screeched against the hardwood floor. You can't do this. I still own 17% of this company, which is now worth half of what it was last week, thanks to your actions, another director noted coldly. The SEC has also expressed a keen interest in your recent communications. You can expect a call from them. Preston stormed out of the room, trailing legal threats behind him. In the hallway, he nearly collided with Serafina, who was arriving for her own scheduled meeting with the board. Their eyes met for a brief, supercharged moment. His face contorted with a lifetime of frustrated rage. You destroyed everything I built, he growled. Serafina met his gaze without flinching. Her voice was quiet, but it held the weight of history. No, Mr. Davenport. You built a house of cards on a rotten foundation. I'm just replacing it with something that will last. He pushed past her without another word, a relic of a bygone era, his empire crumbling to dust behind him. 6 months later, the business world was a different place. The covers of Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal all featured stories on the Davenport transformation. The company, now operating under new leadership with Apex Dynamics maintaining its 30% advisory stake, had implemented sweeping changes. Transparent pay structures had eliminated gender and racial wage gaps. Promotion practices were reviewed quarterly by an independent body. Employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. Most tellingly, innovation metrics were up 40%, and the stock price had recovered almost all of its lost value. The ripple effects were felt across the industry. CEOs quietly ordered internal audits of their own corporate cultures. Several major firms proactively announced new diversity and inclusion initiatives, trying to get ahead of a wave of change they now saw as inevitable. Serafina was invited to deliver the keynote address at the annual Global Leadership Summit, a prestigious event that had never before featured a woman of color as its main speaker. The audience, a sea of predominantly white, male executives, filled the massive convention center ballroom. She stood at the podium, a solitary figure of change, and surveyed the crowd. The Davenport Consolidated case wasn't about one insult or one person, Serafina began, her voice clear and resonant. It exposed a systemic failure that was actively destroying value. When we exclude voices, whether consciously or unconsciously, we limit our collective potential. On the massive screens behind her, data flashed, showing the stark outperformance of companies with diverse leadership across every single metric: innovation, employee retention, crisis resilience, and, most importantly, to the men in the room, stock performance. "This is not social justice," she declared. "This is sound business strategy. The most successful and profitable companies of the next decade will be those that finally recognize that talent does not have a gender, a color, or a pedigree." After her speech, a line of CEOs approached her, asking for consulting help with their own diversity initiatives. Serafina politely connected them with experts from her foundation instead of taking on the work herself. "Real change requires more than one conversation or one consultant," she explained to a particularly persistent bank president. "It requires a genuine, top-to-bottom commitment to questioning assumptions that have gone unchallenged for generations." In a modest apartment across town, Cassandra Davenport watched a recording of Serafina's speech online. The designer clothes and the penthouse apartment were gone. She sat at a small desk, taking notes on a legal pad. Her expression revealed neither resentment nor admiration, but a quiet, focused concentration. She paused the video and wrote in careful, deliberate letters. "Identify blind spots. Question inherited assumptions." She underlined the words twice. She was only just beginning to understand the true magnitude of what she had lost. And more importantly, why she had lost it. 1 year to the day after the incident, Serafina returned to the Art Institute for the Luminaria Gala. The familiar marble halls glowed, but she experienced them through a new lens. No security guard demanded additional identification. Instead, the museum director himself greeted her at the entrance. "Our guest of honor has arrived," he announced warmly. Serafina wore a striking emerald green gown, her hair in an elegant updo. The simple platinum band from her grandfather was still on her wrist, her only piece of jewelry, a constant reminder of her journey. Tonight, she was being introduced as the evening's honoree for her foundation's work in expanding educational access in underserved communities. Thunderous applause filled the grand hall as she entered. People who had once looked right through her now vied for a moment of her attention. She was mingling confidently when she noticed a young woman in a catering staff uniform struggling with a heavy tray of glasses as an impatient guest snapped his fingers at her. "Let me help you with that," Serafina said, smoothly taking one side of the tray to steady it. She looked at the impatient guest. "The staff are working incredibly hard tonight. A little courtesy wouldn't be out of place." The guest, instantly recognizing her, retreated in embarrassment. The young server looked up, her eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "It's my first week." "What's your name?" Serafina asked warmly. "Maya. I'm working here to help pay for my tuition at Northwestern." Serafina reached into her clutch and retrieved a business card. "My foundation has scholarships for young women in STEM. Send me your information tomorrow." Maya's eyes widened further in disbelief. You're Serafina Vance, the honoree." Serafina nodded, a kind smile on her face. "We all start somewhere, Maya. What matters is who we choose to help along the way." Later, as she scanned the crowd, Serafina spotted a familiar face standing near a column. It was Cassandra Davenport. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, a world away from her previous couture. Their eyes met across the glittering room. Cassandra gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't friendly, but it was an acknowledgement, a sign of a lesson learned. Serafina returned the gesture. When Serafina took the podium to give her acceptance speech, the room fell silent. "My grandfather," she began, her voice ringing with confidence, "was a night watchman who spent his life protecting buildings owned by powerful people who never knew his name. He arrived before dark and left after dawn, making his rounds, punching his clock, and dreaming of a world his granddaughter might one day inhabit." She touched the platinum band on her wrist. He taught me that true power isn't found in making others feel small. It's found in lifting others up as you climb. The crowd listened, utterly captivated. We all have moments when we are tested, she continued, when we can choose arrogance or empathy, exclusion or inclusion. Those choices define not just our character, but ultimately our success, our legacy, and the world we leave behind. The room erupted in a standing ovation. As Serafina stepped down from the podium, Dr. Eris Thorne, now a close friend and ally, rushed to embrace her. "You didn't just change a company, Serafina," she whispered. "You changed the entire industry in 1 year." Serafina smiled, surveying the room where her journey of 1,000 miles had begun with a single insulting step. "We," she said, "have only just begun." And that is how you turn the tables. If you believe in justice, karma, and the power of quiet strength, show some love by hitting that like button and sharing this video. Subscribe to Black Stories and ring that notification bell for more satisfying stories where the entitled and the arrogant get exactly what they deserve. What was your favorite moment of Cassandra's downfall? Let us know in the comments below. Our Black Stories family loves to hear your thoughts.